Hi, my name is Greg.
Hi, Greg.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. I want to introduce my friend Mark. He's so shy and he's been sitting up in the corner and won't talk to anybody.
Yeah.
So can everybody say hi, Mark King?
Hi, King.
Hi, my darling.
Mark is going to be speaking at 4 o'clock tonight, but I just wanted to give him a chance to say, we're not. He doesn't want to give away any of his jokes or any of his things, but I just wanted to give him a warm, actually, why don't we give him a warm Palm Springs welcome? You guys have been so
I cannot wait to talk to y'all. I wish they'd let me do it right now. I want to talk to you right now. I'm chomping at the bit.
I did my talk this morning, and he's standing there, he's like, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go.
Yes.
Like some crazy prize fighter. But he's like, I'm ready, Greg. Let me up there. Let me up there. I'm like, I'm not running the goddamn show. Would you just sit down for a minute? So here he is, Mark King. Let's give him another hand. We're so crazy. I want to tell everybody, me and Mark did the pictures at the that photo booth there. It's super cute.
Yes.
And let me just say, it's an older, over 50 crowd. The lighting is freaking perfect. So I'm saying, ladies, right now, everybody, run. You don't have to stay here for 15 minutes. Go. The lighting is worth the goddamn picture. So the guy's is the photographer in here?
No, I think he's still up.
He's out there. Okay, good. I want to just check in with everybody. I want to first, so somebody said, what happened with the Catholic high school? Was everybody here this morning?
Yes.
Okay, I want to tell you about the Catholic high school. First of all, I'm going to stop yelling. So I'm all revved up now after that whole Mark King thing. So I go to this it's called BC High. And like I said, it's a thing like this, and it's just a million white faces, and their shoulders are like twice as wide as mine. I'm like, eek. And they were very, very sweet, and they were very polite. And I just started out by asking them questions. Like I said, basically, I told them like my little thing about being very gay, and like I never played any sports. And I said, basically, you're the enemy. I said, and it's like the teachers are like, what is this gay person saying? So I let them know that they were the enemy, and I was like, so I'm just curious. I heard that this is like a very academic school, which I really didn't hear. I heard it was a jock school, but I wanted to give them a little bit of compliment when I threw in the insult. So I said, and I heard that it's very athletic, i.e. jocks. So it's like, so how many of you are like on the football team or the baseball team or something? 97% of the hands go up, and I was just like, so I was like, can you guys just wait outside and give us a minute? I just want the gays in here. And then we had these little gay kids. I had 3 gay kids that were like our textbook gays. They were all like 85 pounds. Their wrist was like the size of like my middle finger. They were just a little itty bitty thing. Whenever they sat, their like ankle wrapped around the other ankle like 3 times. You know, it's like the greatest. I don't know how they do it, but they just look so adorable when they're folded over like 3 times. And one like with the bangs all the way down to the shoulder. And and we called them the gay mafia. And so I did this thing where the whole week became about allies. And I want to say this because this is also what we were talking about when saying that we're building community. I talked with these kids about allies, and it was interesting that all of a sudden I had this moment where it wasn't about asking people to be allies. I asked them to reflect on, I had the 3 gay mafias sitting up in the front, who are so incredibly courageous from my point of view. And so I said, I want you to think what it's like to be in this school. And I got to speak at the different diversity groups. So there was a group of people of color, the diversity cabinet was the young guys of color. And so I went to visit that group, I went to visit the LGBT group, and then we had a joint group. And so when I had the 3 gay kids up there, I said, I want you to think, given what this school is like, and given that we live in a world that is racist and misogynist and homophobic, what do you think it's like to be these kids? What do you think it's like to be a gay kid in your school and come out of the closet and stick their neck out? Stick their neck out, why? Because they're taking up that space for themselves, but like the message of Harvey Milk, they are stepping out because they are bringing somebody else out. Harvey Milk said, even at your own peril, come out. because you don't know whose life you will change, who you will bring along with you. So I said, I want everyone to reflect on what is it like to be a gay kid in your school. Think about it. I had them close their eyes and I said, now I want you to take turns. Some of you have the courage to give them a compliment as to what kind of courage it takes to be a gay kid coming out of the closet, to be one of the kids of color that's walking down this hallway in this sea of white faces. And we had kid after kid after kid just acknowledging these kids and saying, just you being yourself in this school has been such a role model to me of courage. And it was such an incredible experience of a redefinition of what it is to be an ally, that instead of saying like, oh, I'm going to be nice to this person, instead actually see what a heroic move it is to be a marginalized or a minority community of people in this big majority. So thank you for asking that. And it was to me, it was really life-changing to be in that felt like such a pressure cooker, and to be seeing these kids open up and be seeing like, instead of seeing like, oh, these are the outsiders, seeing the hero in that outsider, instead of seeing just this like kid that's over on the side. So thank you for asking that. I want to just ask if we want to do a check-in. I'd like to hear from people that did some of the workshops that we did or is commenting on this morning's thing. Can anyone be generous and share a little something about what they went to and what they found helpful or what they thought was impressive or moving for them? Is that it? I know. It's little shy flowers. Say it again?
Jeopardy 30 seconds.
The
Please.
presentation.
Why don't you do that right up there? Pass that up to him.
On cannabis was particularly interesting. I was saying that the presentation on cannabis, I'll call him Dr. Dave if I remembered his name correctly, was particularly informative. One of the things that was kind of interesting, personally speaking, is that the lower doses seem to be as effective as higher doses. So when you think of more is better, not necessarily.
Oh, that's good to know. That's good to know because I'm doing the retreat in a couple of weeks, and there are some people who just feel like they are vaping or smoking throughout the day and a lot throughout the day, and it does feel like it's too much. So that's interesting. Who did the presentation on cannabis? Who's the pro in the room? You did?
Oh, no, I
Oh, I'm sorry. Who did it? Who did the presentation?
Dr. Galati, Dave Crowe.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm going to ask some questions about that. Somebody wanted to introduce a friend of theirs, so would you please stand up and introduce your friend?
Oh. Yeah, I just want everybody to meet Talika Singh. So she's.
Wait, let's use the microphone on.
This is Talika Singh, Dr. Talika Singh. She's an internal med doctor, right? At DAP, infectious disease doctor. Extraordinaire, and she's a great cook, right? There she is. Talika.
Thank you.
She's doing another session with Dr. Gover this afternoon at the 3 o'clock break time. So if you haven't gone to that one yet, mindfulness and coping with stress, please do.
Anyone else want to share something? So here's what I'd like to ask. I want you to work with me. Okay, you know what? So I'm not afraid of silence. I'm not afraid of a crowd that doesn't want to raise their hands and share. I'm not a fan of them, but I'm not afraid of them. Okay, so that's one thing. I'm getting testy. I want to plant a seed. I would like for us to think again of that our sharing is literally sharing. So I guess what I want to ask is, I'm going to ask a new question, and it was like what I was doing this morning. I want us to think about what this community, the people that put together this kind of stuff, or the people that do this work, or us coming together as a community, what it means to us. And I'd like if there is someone that would take a moment and just say, this is what this community means to me. This is what I have gained from the work of you guys bringing people together and stuff. Is there anyone that'd be willing to do that? I'd love to hear that from a few people. It's a way of generously acknowledging the people in our lives that are making a difference. And I don't mean just the leaders, I mean every person, when we show up, we're making a difference because our presence matters. It gives us space of blessing. It gives us a space for people to be heard and to be witnessed. So thank you.
So I'm Trent, and
Let's say hi, Trent.
so I have had 3 partners in my life, and none of them are alive. And most of my friends from all the years that I grew up are gone. I was living alone in San Francisco pretty much, and wanted to find my tribe. And so the only place I could find it was either Palm Springs or Fort Lauderdale. So I kept going to both to see which would be the best for me. And after I retired from San Francisco County, I moved down here. And this is what we have left after that Holocaust. You know, we are all we have. And I know that there have been times when we get upset with each other and we're not always best friends with each other, and there are times when people get angry. But I still want them to know that I'll cover your back. I'll be there, and I think we all will be there for each other. That's the most important thing, and we really can't hold grudges. You know, we just can't. We can't afford it. We don't have enough of us left. So whatever it was that was bothering us, we need to get over it. I'm not saying there's any of that here in the room. I just know that sometimes, you know, I just hear people get angry with each other, and I think that we have a right to be angry with each other, but don't disown that person or give up on that person. Don't give up, you know, vice versa, because this is all we've got. That's all.
Thank you. Can we get one more? An acknowledgement of our community, please. Let's bring it over here.
Hi, my name is Frank, and
Say hi.
I have only lost 4 people that were close to me, 2 friends, but also 2 lovers. And I always felt as though I didn't belong because I didn't have everybody I knew that had passed with AIDS, or I didn't cross out 46 names in my address book because they passed with HIV. And I started in New York, and then I moved to DC. And I was only in my 40s when I was diagnosed with full-blown AIDS. I was 40, actually, the week after my 40th birthday. And I felt like a dinosaur. I couldn't go out and see people that were not 10 or 15 years younger than me. And it wasn't until I came to Palm Springs that I volunteered for the AIDS conference that we had in Palm Springs in the early 2000s, I think it was. And I met people that were interesting, that you didn't have to have sex with them before they talked to you, and that gave back to me as much as I was giving out. And from that point on, I volunteered with different AIDS programs and things like that. And it was the first time that I felt I was part of a community, because living in New York for 14 years and living in DC for 5, I didn't feel as though I was part of the community. I was me and everybody else. And being here has been really great, because I've met a lot of people, while I might not include them in my circle of friends, they're people whose face I know. I might not remember their name, but I'll remember their face. And Palm Springs for me has been very inclusive, and I'm very happy to live here.
Just want to give one more. Did you have your hand raised? Did you have your hand raised? Hey! I just want to thank you for the sharing. I want to thank you for the sharing. And I think it's what someone said earlier this morning, like to recognize what we have, in community. It's incredibly powerful, and acknowledging the people that are present there for us, to hear us, to be our witnesses, acknowledging the people that are doing the work, and acknowledging one another for coming out and being in that space, like just being in that space to be together. It's really important. So I want to give a thank you, and you want to pass off sending people out? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Who advanced the slides? Ta-da! So here we are in beautiful Palm Springs in winter/spring. And it's really exciting to have this be the third time we've done this. Well, we did it first 4 years ago, took a year off, and then did the 2.0 last year, and again this year. And it's getting better each year, and that's thanks to all of you. I just want to give kind of a brief update on what we've been doing, kind of from the beginning, and what we've been doing in the past year, an update from what we talked about last year. The HIV and Aging Research Project is who we are, and research is our middle name. So we like to be able to focus on that and tell you what we've been doing. So, why are we studying this here? People talk about how special Palm Springs is, and how so many of us made it here. And that's reflected in the numbers of people living with HIV. I'll direct you over to the East Valley. These numbers are courtesy of the Ryan White program. The epidemiologist for the county put these together for us. And so you look at the West County is like Riverside, San Bernardino, it's Riverside basically, city of Riverside and the suburbs. And then East County is us. And they counted the zip codes between Palm Springs and Palm Desert. And so you look at under 50, it's 20, 21, 22%. It's less than half of what it is in the West Valley. So that gives us a sense of the really unique demographics we have. So that means that 78% of people are already over 50 here. Nationally, that average is 50. So we're way ahead of the curve, so to speak. And then you get to people 50 to 59, it's nearly 40% of all the people. People 60 to 69, nearly 30. And then people in their 70s, an amazing almost 9%. And 1% are over 80. And there's actually one person in their 90s whom they could not include because of confidentiality reasons. But one person, there are more that I know of, if you talk to the doctors. Most have 1 or 2 patients in their practices who are in their 90s. So that really speaks to why we study HIV and aging here. That's not just because we think it's important, but because we have a unique demographic that can really add to the science around this. A lot of the research that's been done around HIV and the big cohort studies and so forth, you look at the ages, everybody's 50 to 59 or 40 to 59. It's right in that middle. And they don't know what happens to people when they get older. And they say, oh, we're just going to have to wait and see. And that's when I'm in the audience and I raise my hand and said, no, you don't. It's here now in Palm Springs, and this is where you need to come. But it wasn't until we started doing the research, and formed this group that started to happen. So just a little bit of history about, no, we're there already. So the HIV and Aging Research Project started about 5 years ago when a bunch of clinicians who had moved down to Palm Springs had been told that they could do research in addition to taking care of HIV positive patients. It wasn't happening for a number of reasons. We don't have dedicated research institutions here. We don't have, a major academic university here. So it's really hard for, a service provider organization, a clinical care organization, to try to start from scratch a research organization. And even though they said that they were committed to doing that, it wasn't happening right away. So they got together and said, we need to do this ourselves. And one thing that we can bring to the table is that if we combine forces, if you had the people at DAP, you got the people at Borrego or Eisenhower, if you put all these people together, you've got an amazing over 6,000 patients you can look at. That's a big cohort. And they're all much older than everywhere else. So that's kind of how that happened and why we're doing what we're doing. So we'll talk about the Corey grant. And Chris is going to come up, and I want to introduce Chris. He's kind of a behind-the-scenes guy, but he's the person who makes this all happen. He's our one paid employee. He's our admin person for this Corey Research Grant. Unfortunately, we got some money so we can actually afford to pay somebody. And he's been amazing. And so for the past 2 years, he's really kind of held this together. We'll talk about some of the work we've done, but before he comes up, I just want to give him a round of applause for all the work that
Thank you, Jeff. Sure. And that's it.
he's done. It's the right arrow.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you. Thanks for the acknowledgement. That's more than I probably do. So PCORI, what is it? Like all these acronyms from our government agencies. PCORI was set up through the Affordable Care Act, and what it stands for is Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute. And what they really want to drive with the Affordable Care Act and looking at future research, how do we incorporate caregivers and patients into this process and not just make it with institutions or doctors driving the topics for research and the research itself. And so what we're doing here, we were given a capacity building grant to engage the community, and we wanted to get our different stakeholder groups together. So our stakeholders would be our patients, our caregivers, community-based organizations who do interact with HIV patients, and then providers, doctors, and then the research community. And we took all of the stakeholders and we created a steering committee where we could set up a structure where we could draw from those people and they could provide leadership within the community as we started putting forth our work. And other things that we are looking to do is disseminate the knowledge that we have, identify and explore those key topics for research, and then actually build a capacity within our stakeholder group that they can take the research and go forward with it and then give us results for that. So one of the things that we wanted to do first was get feedback from the community. So the way that we went about doing that is that we developed questions in our stakeholder group that we were going to give to the community. We trained our committee members on how to do focus groups. So we had great support from University of California, Riverside, and one of the professors there, Andy Sabika, came out and taught us how to conduct the focus group, how to elicit the best information from people, how to make sure that we document it properly so then we can later go through and pick apart what people were saying and have it make sense to us. And then we went out and canvassed the community. We looked for people that were in our different stakeholder groups, but we wanted to get people that were outside of our committee structure to give us that feedback. So it would be people like yourself, people who are actual patients who are dealing with HIV issues on a daily basis. And the focus groups were chosen from the community, but we wanted to make sure that it was all driven by the community, and that meant that involvement with you. So these are just the basic questions that we developed. They were under the categories of health issues, resiliencies, and then actual research. So we asked people, what are the health issues that you're actually dealing with, and put those up for the top 3. And then resiliency is looking how people actually cope with those issues that they have, their health issues. If they employ a social group to get out, if they exercise, what are they doing that helps them deal with their HIV and help them be successful. And then we wanted to ask what the community thought about research. What do you see in your life, in your experience as a patient, that really that you don't see happening in the research field? How could you communicate that to us so then we could possibly put that into a research protocol? And under these 3 top issues, 3 top themes, then we came up with topics. So under health issues, depression and isolation came up a lot. People are very concerned about the effects of medication was having on their long-term memory, what effects it might be having on the brain, cognitive function, that was very important. Then we got out from the groups what resiliencies, what are they using? So as you see here, examples like the gym or exercising, but other ways of getting out in the community and giving back. And lots of times, you know, like they say at Christmas, you know, it's like the best thing to give, not receive. And it actually builds people a lot when they're able to give to their community this way. And then looking at what long-term research projects could we employ. So inflammation and comorbidities, concurrent diseases that are going on at the same time, how do we deal with those, and how can we get information back on how to better deal with them, and then how to communicate that out to our community. And once we got the answers from the focus groups, then we went out and we got another group of citizen panels. And these were reflecting the same stakeholder groups that we had, so that's patients, caregivers, and community-based organizations, researchers, providers. And we had them look at the different things that came up, and from their experience, what we could find that's an actual study. What could we look at that would give us some hard science back, so we could actually communicate some of these findings back to people or doctors so they can employ it directly with their patients. And that's what we were looking for, is to have good on-the-ground kind of information that we could pass on and use, not just pie-in-the-sky kind of findings. So this is just a picture of the focus group that we had getting together, and taking the different categories under inflammation. They looked at some of what the cohort studies might be, how we could use metaforum in a study. Cognitive function was a really big issue, and they looked at some of the things like the leaky gut syndrome with microbiome, and diet and exercise studies. And then looking just at what isolation depression does. Cannabis was one of the issues, like, is too much not a good thing? You know, comparative effectiveness studies, how can we compare one drug against another to see what would be the best for an HIV patient, what is the best outcome. And then the psilocybin study, that specifically dealt with a situation that a lot of patients experience, that's like a PTSD situation, where they are constantly dealing with the images and the memories of bad situations. So this is a study that would help them break out of that using a drug and talk therapy. So it's a guided therapy with people that are helping them with this. And this is a picture of Alejandra Cabral, and she's a graduate student at UCLA now, going for her doctorate in public health. And she did a lot of the distilling and working down the information from the focus groups and the citizen panels. And as you see here, the poster that they have up there, this was at the American Public Health Association conference that was in San Diego. So we have a chance here to just talk about the work that we've been doing. And one of our big tasks, one of our assignments, is to disseminate the information that we get. So this was part of that process. And then she also helped us put together the article that was published in the JANIC, the Journal of American Nursing. So we're trying to get that information out to people where they can actually use it. And some of the other activities that we have ongoing that we'll be looking at even after the project ends is doing further focus groups for deaf people. And the deaf community has a big issue, a difficult time sometimes accessing good medical services. Because if they find a doctor that meets their needs, they can't always communicate with them just because of the either American Sign Language issue or not being able to read lips well. So that is an issue that comes up, and we're looking to talk to them about giving us feedback for that. And then other research training activities, some that we've done. One is the comic art that Dr. McMillan has presented here today. And if you didn't get a chance to go to that, there is an afternoon session that is going to present that again. So that was good. And we also had a session of what we call targeted co-learning, so that we're reaching out to our community and looking at what ethics in research are. So as we move on, we have our community educated so they can support us in the right way, and they know that we're doing these projects in an ethical way. And other things that we're doing are public forums like this, and making sure that we distribute that information and disseminate all of our findings. And then get more money to do research. That's always the big one. So any clues that you can pass on to us about that would be great. I know that there are organizations here in the Valley that are looking to support community action efforts, and it's always good to be able to tap into those local support systems. And that's it for me. Thank you for your attention.
So Chris mentioned that out of the focus groups and citizens panels, one of the things they wanted to study was the microbiome. And you probably heard about this. It's been a lot in the news in the last few years. The microbiome is all those critters that live inside us that aren't really us. So all the little bugs in our guts, and they live in our skin, they're all over us. We're vastly outnumbered by these, they call it flora, these little critters that we don't really know much about, but we're beginning to learn are really vital to how we function and to our health. So what we decided to do was to compare older HIV positive people with older HIV negative people to see what, if any, differences there might be. And we partnered with a wonderful researcher. She was at UC Riverside at the time. Now she's with UC Irvine. Her name is Ilham Masudi, and she actually recently presented some of these the scientific results. We can't publish them yet. They haven't been published, we can't talk about them yet, at a conference here in Palm Springs just last week. So what we were looking at is comparing the levels of inflammation in the blood. You go to the doctor and they take your blood, and they get some of these tests, and some of them are special research tests. But they can measure how much inflammation, low-grade inflammation caused by HIV or other causes you might have going on, versus what's going on in the gut microbiome. And the way we did this is we took a blood sample. That's pretty straightforward. And to get the gut microbiome, you have to get a little more creative. So what we did was a little swab that we asked people to stick up their butt and take it out and put it in a tube. And then from that, they were able to look at the microbiome that way. And then another thing we did, what I'm going to talk about now, is we surveyed everybody in that study about their various health issues. So this is kind of a busy pie graph. Hopefully you can, it shows up better on the big screen. And so these are the negative, HIV negative people. And this being Palm Springs, it was most of the people who participated were men. So those are the results that we're focusing on, because we didn't have enough women to make any real conclusions, driving conclusions from. But if you look at this, you'll see that it's kind of the common medical conditions you see in older people. Blood pressure was huge, arthritis, things like that, and hearing loss, and also vision loss. So those are the big ones in the HIV negative group. And then in the HIV positive group, you see some differences. There was less arthritis, hypertension was less, but you saw a lot more neuropathy, which is more than double, more depression, and those are the big ones that stood out. So you can see already that there are some differences in the clinical health issues that people are experiencing when you compare positive versus negative in the same age group. But what we were really interested in was how does this affect people's quality of life, and how is it different? And so we noticed some interesting things in terms of the health ratings. So we looked at health ratings, and we found that, as would be expected, that HIV negative people reported excellent health more than the negative population did. Interestingly, when you got a little bit further down, when we talked about very good health, it was almost exactly the same. And then when you talked about good health, it was actually better in HIV positive than it was in HIV negative. So we thought about this, and then some of the reasons we thought that this might be true is that people who are HIV positive get very regular medical care, right? They're not alive unless you're on meds and seeing your doctors, otherwise we wouldn't be here. And the fact that we're doing this, and we have really good medical care for HIV in this valley, is that people, their problems get addressed. If they have high blood pressure, any good doctor is going to put them, tell them to diet and exercise, take a pill, same with cholesterol. So all these kind of other comorbidities that somebody who's negative, who may not be monitoring their health very carefully, are really well addressed in HIV. So we think there's kind of what we call a treatment effect, and the people who are in treatment and have good care are getting their problems addressed, and they're doing better that way. And then we looked at things like pain was pretty much the same. Exercise, people did that pretty much the same. Of course, there was a big difference in how many people were on disability. Obviously, a lot of people on HIV have had to go on disability over the years. That's why I wanted to move here, because I can't afford to live in places like San Francisco anymore on a disability income. So that's why we've had such a big migration here to the Valley. And then there were also differences in other social determinants, like do they live with somebody? A lot more positive people lived alone. But conversely, we saw that a lot more positive people had pets than people who don't. So, and I'm one of these people. I'm single, but I have a dog, and he's my companion. I think that's true for a lot of us. So people find companionship where they could get it, and it seems to have an effect on how well they do. And then we did notice a slight difference in how sexually active people are. The people with HIV reported being somewhat less sexually active than those who were negative. And again, this might be due to the stigma, or the fact that it is because of the disease, they're not quite as healthy, they might have erectile dysfunction issues, things like that. So we found some interesting differences there. And it was kind of a small preliminary study, but it really gave us kind of a snapshot of what's going on with people, both in terms of clinical health and then their mental health and quality of life. And so another research study that we did just this past year, a few months ago in November, was looking at resiliencies. Why is it that some people thrive and others don't? We talk about all the problems people experience with HIV, but we don't really talk about the positive things. How is it that some people cope better than others? And if we can find out what those are, maybe we can translate that into better interventions or services we should be offering to people living with HIV. And so this came out of a big cohort study called the Multi-Center AIDS Cohort Study that's been going on for about 35 years now. And it was started back in, I think, 1984, when everybody was dying like flies. And they said, we really need to get a handle on who's getting HIV and why. And at the time, it was in gay men, so they formed a huge cohort of thousands of patients in cities across the country of comparing gay men who are positive with who are negative to see who's getting HIV and who isn't and what happens to them over time. And so it's a wonderful way to look at what's been happening over the decades in people living with HIV. So there were a couple of researchers, Ron Stahl from the University of Pittsburgh and Michael Planke from Georgetown University in DC, who wanted to look at this issue of resiliency to really understand why. Ron Stahl had done a lot of work on LGBT health and said that this was kind of came out of his desire to find out, when we look at LGBT populations, they're always looking at the negatives. Well, they drink more, they do more drugs, they have higher rates of depression, they have unsafe sex, so what's wrong with these people? And he said, if you look at the numbers, that's the minority. Most people are doing fine. In fact, in spite of everything they're going through, there's rampant homophobia in society, people are dealing with HIV, all the loss in our communities, the post-traumatic stress that we've been talking about. So why is it that they're doing well? So they designed a survey to look exactly at what those resiliencies were in the context of that cohort study. And so they completed that, and then they said, well, Dr. Planke came to us and said, we did this in the context of a research study, and that's not the real world. We want to go into a real community where you've got the same kind of people, mostly HIV positive gay men, and see what it's like in that context. So who did we survey? So we did over 100 people at 3 different venues. We had a booth. You might have seen our booth at the Pride Fest, and thank you to all who stopped by and took time out of your festivities to fill out a very long and sometimes intrusive survey. And we also did it at one of the Positive Life meetings, and then at one of the gay chorus practices. So we got kind of an overview of different people in different places. And this is what we found out, that most of them had been living with HIV for over 30 years. The range was anywhere from 10 years to 40 years. Almost all of them had an undetectable viral load, 95%. It's a pretty well-educated crowd. 70% of them were college graduates. Just like in the other survey, about 40% were single and 50% lived alone. So that's kind of who we were looking at. So what did we find? Well, we found that about 2/3 of them had, what they call resiliency factors. So lower level of anxieties than you might expect, higher levels of companionship, be that with people or pets, friends, not just having a partner, being in a relationship, and a better emotional state. So basically being less depressed. So, this gave us a really interesting, it's only 100 people. It doesn't tell you, everything you want to know, but it was a good start. It gave us a good snapshot and kind of where we, gave us some ideas of where we should go next. So we thought about who we didn't reach with this survey. So because we were doing the same survey they did in Max, we were only looking at gay men. Well, obviously that's not who's living with HIV in this valley. We have a lot of women living with HIV, we have straight people living with HIV, we have long-term survivors who were born with HIV, or infected, at or near birth, who, young people now in their 30s. So they're long-term survivors as well. So we thought the way to address this would be to do this over the internet. That's probably all taken some kind of survey over the internet at some point. And one of the things they've learned is that people are a lot more honest when they're answering these questions anonymously over the internet, especially when you start talking about really personal things like how depressed are you, have you ever thought of suicide, start asking questions about sex. So that's always a good way to get really honest feedback from people instead of sitting in front of somebody you might know and filling out those questions. And also the people we weren't reaching were people who aren't socializing. We're talking about isolation. A lot of people are isolating and they're sitting at home in their apartments or houses, and they don't go out. Very rarely, if ever. I mean, they go to the doctor, they may go to the store, pick up their meds or have them delivered, but they're not at events like this. They're not going to Pride, they're not, participating in a gay chorus, things like that. So those are the people we really want to find out what's going on with, right? Because they're the ones having problems, and we need to be studying them. So again, the internet is a good way to do that. And if you offer some kind of incentive, say a $25 gift card or something like that, then people have the incentive to do it. Even if they're not depressed and don't want to do things, usually the money is a pretty good incentive for a lot of people. So we'd like to pilot test this here in the Coachella Valley, and eventually, the thought is that once we create this kind of survey that can be administered over the internet, and there are a lot of challenges. We were talking with a researcher up at UC San Francisco who was doing this, who discovered that there were Chinese bots that were automatically taking these surveys so they could get the incentives. And had to stop the study, completely redesign it. It was crazy. I'm thinking, this should be simple. We'll just do this. Oh, no. There's stuff going on. So not as easy as you might think. So that's going to be one of our projects that we're going to be doing after next month. Chris was talking about the Cohort grant. That was a 2-year grant. It started 2 years ago in April. So at the end of next month, we'll be finishing up with that. No more money coming in with that, so sorry, Chris, no more salary for a while. And, and we'll be applying, as Chris said, for more monies, but that's one of the projects we'd like to do. And the good news is something like that shouldn't cost as much as some of the other stuff we've been doing. So that's just a couple of ideas of what we've done, and what we plan to do. Obviously, none of this happens without the help of our funders and our partners, some of whom are in this room, like Jill from the center and people from DAP. Brandon Brown, sitting there in the audience. Wave your hand, Brandon. Be acknowledged. He's our co-PI partner. A wonderful teacher and mentor at Guider and all this for Chris, and the UC Riverside Centers for Healthy Communities that we're a part of. And of course, all of you for all that you've done, coming to these programs, learning positive life programs, participating in research when you can. So that's kind of where we go. And that's my support system. So we've got about five or so minutes, but I just wanted to get some feedback from you, and if you want to just get thoughts from people, comments, what you'd like to see, and we have somebody, Matt over there.
Is that a whippet?
No, he's a greyhound. He's a retired race dog.
And the sweetest dog you've ever seen, next to Betty.
Hi, Dog. Jeff, I just want to say for a moment how proud I am of you. This was a dream of yours that I'm sitting here watching the results at this point, and I'm just, thank you. You guys are number. I guess my question is, where else is this happening? Is this happening anywhere else in the country? This type of focused aging research?
Places like Korea and New York have been looking at aging for a long time. One of the leaders in the country, and they've done a large it's starting to be nationwide survey. Blanking on the name of it. ROA, research on older adults with HIV. And so they did it about 5 years ago, just in New York and San Francisco, and came up with kind of the first really detailed data on this. And now they've expanded to cities across the country. We have been trying to find funding to do that. It's challenging. We may or may not be able to make that happen. But they've been one of the leaders. But in terms of a really local, community-based, grassroots effort like this, we don't know of any others. So we're kind of proud that we get to be unique in that way. And it's because, as they were saying earlier, Palm Springs is really unique. This is where people have come for their tribe, and it's really the last gay ghetto. This is Fort Lauderdale, the last gay ghettos left, because everybody's been, as the city's gentrified, forced out. So this is where people are. So, it's a unique opportunity, and that's why we want to capitalize it. We're really lucky to have partners at UC Riverside, UCLA, UCSD. I lived in San Diego for years. And we get them interested and say, hey, we've got this. They say we want to study this stuff, we don't have the people. And I raise my hand and say, well, we've got it. This is God's waiting room for older people with HIV. This is where you need to be. Anybody else?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, I'm sure you said it up there in the data, what is the comparison of HIV negative people and HIV positive people in the level of depression? Like, how did they compare?
So with HIV, depression was 14%, and it was 6% in HIV negative. Yeah, so more than double.
And I'm just curious about in isolation, are we hearing from folks as to what are effective ways of bringing people out? Do we how effective do you guys feel like you are being here in bringing people out, and like the numbers of people that you're getting, or new people that you're getting to come to events and stuff? And like, has anyone brainstormed what are going to be the techniques of? It feels like there needs to be, I feel like, some kind of brainstorming session of what will it be? Will it be like, as we're listening to all this data, I'm thinking, could there be some peer outreach where you almost give the gift card for the new person that you bring in, that you bring in somebody else, that there be some way of like where every one of us are on a mission of, like I'm thinking of old guys that I walk around the city that I see that I never stop to talk to, that I should be saying like, I do this retreat, blah, 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 I just don't have the guts to do it, but I feel like I could be grabbing that person, but it feels like unless there was some kind of agreement that I was going to do with other people, I wouldn't want to be the crazy person. I feel like, is there some kind of movement to like, how do we bring out people that are not working, they're not at school, they're not doing anything except for going and getting their groceries, and if they're lucky, walking a dog?
Yeah, I mean, this is what we want to do, and this with all this capacity building has been around, and this is happening, or it's not like this isn't happening. I mean, in this community especially, we have an amazing Let's Kick Ass chapter that has social events every month, potlucks, coffees, movie nights, and things like that. This is just a group of guys, and it's thanks to Matt, who came down here a few years ago and gave the presentation about the group that he and Tess Anderson started in San Francisco for a Positive Life program. And out of that grew this amazing group that has over 300 people. The center partnered with LKA. We went to them and said, people have this grief and this depression, this sense of isolation that won't go away. How do we address that? You deal with this population all the time. And so we collaborated with them to create a closed long-term survivor support group conducted by somebody who's trained in these issues, who is themselves a long-term survivor, and it has been phenomenal. They keep adding more groups, people keep signing up for them, it's been amazing. So these things are happening, and what we need to do is start, as you say, evaluating those, and because you can't get them paid for if you can't prove how well they work. We know they work, but you have to have numbers. So that's part of what we want to do, and they call it comparative effectiveness research, and that's what Procoria loves. So we keep lobbying these ideas at them to see what will stick and what will fall, but that's why we're here and what we want to do. So thank you.
Jeff, I wish I could tell you whose byline was on an article I read in the Body last October. I was living in Columbus, Ohio, and read an article from LKA describing some of the activities of this group and the goals of the group, and decided I need to be there. So I came to Palm Springs in January, and a month later I decided this is my home. That article gives a lot of credit for getting me off of the couch. Thank you.
Can you say your name and let everyone say hi to you?
Hi, I'm Jai.
You want to say what it's been like being here?
It's great. I lived in San Francisco for 30 years, Ohio for 6, and coming here I felt a homecoming of being back in California, for one thing. And secondly, to feel like I walk down the street and I'm normal and not a skinny-ass freak is another wonderful experience. To feel like there's community around me instead of just my brothers and sisters, literally by blood, in Ohio, and not being able to connect with others. I'm quitting my antidepressant drugs now. I don't need them anymore.
What it makes me look at is like, okay, once people start, exhibiting these resiliencies, how does it improve their health? I wish we could talk more. I'm sure we could go on for another hour about this, but I want to bring up. Well, like I said, is there any more questions? I don't want to cut it off, but we've got another research.
I'd like to ask a question about that particular slide. I don't really need the microphone. This is the
Let's use it for everyone to hear.
Sorry.
Let's use the mic to hear.
Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Bill. My question about that particular slide, that's the what. Are there researchers doing the whys? Like, why is there a big hearing difference here, or all of these different things?
Yeah, so like I said, this is a snapshot. So this is showing association, this population, and this is the negative folks. Those are the positive guys. So, and this is, the first stage of research. You look at the differences, and then you start asking those questions that you're asking. So why is this happening? And then you start looking at it deeper and designing a protocol to answer that question.
But you supply this information, and the universities access this to do their studies.
Right, so we publish it with the help of Dr. Brown, because that's what he does for a living. Academics have to publish a parish. And then that gets out there, and then people start coming to us. Dr. Planky, who did that research in the Y study, came to us and said, you're in the real world, you've got a real community. This is not cherry-picked people in a research study. We want to study this here. So, we're getting our name out there, and, we're building it, and they're starting to come. And we're also generating our own ideas that we want to research out of things like this. So we're at the hour, and we're going to talk a little bit more about research with the people doing research in the community right now.